Hey everyone, this is another episode about me talking about Cody Schneider. The really good thing that I like about Cody Schneider, he really talks about the importance of growth and marketing as the number one priority to address when you're still not at 1 million at recurring revenue. And on a side note, I really want to apologize for the last two episodes. I've finally configured the audio, so there should be audio in both me talking and the video. But without further ado, if you haven't seen this podcast, it's a really good one, hyping about why podcast is a strong form of content for trust to funnel that in to a top of funnel short form video. What that means is that you do long form podcast type of Q&A content, use that as a trust format, then you chop it up and you repurpose it to short form, and then you put it out to where your customers are located and consuming information. That's the most important part. So for YouTube, it's all educational. LinkedIn, it's more for SaaS companies or wherever you think your customers are at. So let's have a listen to see what Cody has to say, and I'll pause whenever I feel like there is a great thing to elaborate on.
5% of those will hit and outperform the rest of them. But if just a couple of those hit, right, that 5%, so we'll say 10 of them do out of that 200, then like I know that other creators, without us even talking to them, are going to join our referral network and then go and do videos about that. And so it creates this growth.
This is what he means, the 10% that would work. So when you do the long form, you chop it up into short form videos, and then you read the data. This is the most important thing. Don't worry about editing if you don't have the budget. If you have the budget, go for the edits. But if you don't, just raw dog everything. All you need is a moving head and subtitles, and focus on the hooks that are working. And what he means by the ones that are working a lot, focus on what is going right with the numbers, with impressions, reactions, comments, and analyze what that video was doing well in. I would just copy and paste the hooks for the future videos. And also you want to look at the videos that were underperforming and do the opposite of what they are, or just avoid doing those things. That way you can really hook in and understand what your customer wants. Because forget about product, you just have to focus on the market and what they want first, because that's the most important part. Then you build a product around it.
Flywheel. Anyways, yeah, I feel like that's like similar an idea to what you're talking about. Like yours is like that service company side, and then there's this whole other side of, okay, how do I do that within software, but take that idea from the UGC? So I think that's super interesting. But,
yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about how you're tactically doing that. Like when you do, is it just you, that space? Can you scale that where it's like team members are handling that work for you? Or are you looking at this, oh, this is a super high touch thing that I have to do in the beginning, like as this service business founder?
Yeah. So right now
For those that don't know, high touch means that you have to be clicking the buttons, talking, versus automating it or handballing it to some offshore team like a VA from the Philippines.
I'm not focused on scaling. I said today on Twitter or somewhere that I just want 10 clients that never want to cancel. So I'm at the stage where I just want to deliver exceptional value. And then if I have someone that's saying this is unbelievable, then I can start to think about scaling it. So yeah, it's super high touch right now. I'm fine with that. I know it's not as attractive of a business model, but I'm not in the stage of scaling. So I shouldn't allocate effort to that. And by the way, like this all falls under, this isn't new. What I just said isn't a new concept. All I'm doing is leading with value or giving something away for free and hope that I get some value or something valuable to me back at some point. Like Alex Hormozy wrote a whole book about this. But yeah, I think it's another example of putting money in the bank before you go to the ATM. Like you have to give someone something, unless you're like really credible and trustworthy and have a big following like the Greg Eisenbergs of the world. I'm a nobody on Twitter and LinkedIn, so I need to do something that makes me stand out. I don't have a bunch of logos. Yeah, I'm also doing this in an email campaign. So when we spoke last, we were talking about Apollo. You told me about a campaign that was performing really well for you. I didn't copy it, but drew inspiration from it. So I'm doing an outreach campaign right now where I'm inviting people to a podcast and I'll host these one-on-one content interviews. And the pitch is like, hey, I'm going to create a bunch of short-form clips with you that are super tailored to your audience. Like it might be a podcast, but really it's a bunch of content. It's like a library of content that you, that's the outcome that you get from this. And hopefully the outcome is you increase your deal flow. So
I think founders are starting to realize.
That is what I'm doing, and that's what I suggest a lot of people consider if they have nowhere to start and it's all just chopping up information and making short form videos. Lead with value, which is give it away for free, and you have to just construct your offer in a way that people you see it, they see it appealing. Well, one, it's for free. Two, they're going to get heaps of content. They're going to get a week's worth of short form chopped up. They're going to get a long form content. With YouTube, I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm posting every single day. So I feel like what I'm addressing is the quantity, but not the quality. So that's one thing I have to figure out. And also, I'm the same. I'm the nobody on LinkedIn and YouTube. I have no authority yet, which means no followers. So you have to do things for free. You do things for free to get case studies. You use the case studies as content. And then once you've got the content out, then you've got credit and credibility.
Realize how like impactful this is to like okay, so my friend's coming on the show like in 2 days from now, and I've been helping him build this podcast for his business. He does equipment leasing for biotech, so he now has an email list of 23,000. It's basically every seed to Series B founder is on this list and listen to this show every week. And in the last 2 weeks, he's basically closed like partnerships with 3 Fortune 100 companies that want to sponsor the show. And one of the biggest banks in the world right now is their like biotech arm is like trying to get in a relationship with him. And this is like in 7 months, they basically accomplished this whole thing by just like creating this super niche podcast just for biotech founders. So
wait, was this done with like through an outreach campaign or no?
We combined a bunch of things. So basically what we did is like made the show. It's called like the Biotech Star Podcast. We named the show that. We then scraped every email that's a founder in the biotech space. And then we put them on a list and we started sending them the episodes. And then we ran Facebook ads and optimized to the episodes so that it would get downloads. And then we did podcast SEO so that they would start to rank basically for like all the keywords related to what they wanted to rank for. So if you search biotech, they come up right on any of the podcasting.
This is the part where I'm going to figure this out. Podcast SEOs, you just have to rank for the best podcasts and newsletters. If you use newsletters to advertise your podcast, people just see it more as here's more content, not as advertising. And that's the trick there.
Platforms. So with that though, like they're going to have this media arm that now suddenly they have leverage where they can go and negotiate with the top 5 bank, right? And that top 5 bank is worried about not getting in relationship with them because they have this direct line of communication like to them. And this is a 10-person team that's been doing
a direct line of communication that becomes a negotiating asset when making deals. That's a podcast channel. If someone told me that as a founder, one, I'll be like, are you joking me? And 2, like, I don't believe you. And 3, how do you even know if it's a negotiating hand? 4, I can get it done for you with no money at all. And it's a line of communication that also draws status and makes you become the thought leader of that specific niche that you're focusing on. I mean, that is the negotiation that you're dealing with.
doing this for 7 months, right? But like all of that media, like that they make, they turn into clips, they turn into blog posts, they turn into all of this, right? Like it's this playbook that I'm starting to see these B2B companies do. And like exactly what you're talking about. Every founder now, like they can create, like they can basically make themselves famous within this like small ass niche. But the value that like that has to their company, especially when they're going to like $1 million ARR or 10 million ARR, is so dramatic. Like the impact there. So anyways, what you're doing, I'm just like, fuck. Like if I wasn't doing what I'm doing right now, I'd probably go into that because it's just gonna. I feel like it's just you're just providing so much impact to those founders.
Yeah, I'm curious to thank you, but I'm super curious.
Just to sum up, make podcasts, but the thing before that is how do you pitch it so it's so valuable that they can't say no? That's the hard part, because they're not going to see a big return on investment straight away, because podcasts do take a while. I'm still trying to test it out. What I am saying is that after 1 or 2 episodes, you're not going to get deals straight away. But if you build it up, you will. It might take 6 months, 12 months, but it just depends on if the founder wants to wait that long. And if they are, they probably do have money to invest into something like this.
Curious to know like how you can convert a seemingly endless list that you can get from Apollo or Built With or whatever your source is into an owned list. So you're helping this person direct that traffic to a podcast. So then you're owning that audience a little bit there. Maybe that podcast can then.
So the question is that he's asking is, how are you using email to drive traffic into your podcast to get views?
Refer them to a newsletter, but
they're on a newsletter, so we're not even cold emailing them. Like I'm gray listing this, and we're sequencing in 200 people, or sorry, I think 350 now a day. And those people, literally every week, they get an email that's like podcast, name of the episode, and we see open rates that are 40% plus, click through rates that are 5% plus, unsubscribes that are 0.6%, and like the list grows. Like we're gonna grow the list probably. It'll be at 100,000, I bet, by the end of the year for them. And on that newsletter, like every week, every person in biotech, like the goal of this thing, right, is like every person in biotech is going to get an email. But it won't like this whole newsletter thing, like the challenge is like, how do I make content? So I was just talking to my girlfriend about this like 2 days ago because I had this epiphany, but like with newsletters, it's what's the content that I'm going to get distributed? So podcasts are this way that you basically can create content really easily by having smart people on like you. And then you're basically just like having them share all their knowledge. And I just take that transcript and I turn that into that newsletter. Like this is something that we built into Swell, right? Like it's just like out of the box. So now suddenly I have this newsletter and I can email that out every week to whoever my target ICP is. They don't even think it's marketing yet. Like they don't even think podcasts are marketing.
Okay, so this is the play that I'm going to do this week. I've got 2 people this week doing a podcast with. That's free. Me saying that, I feel like I have moved the needle. 2 people, one tomorrow about marketing, and one on Friday, Australian Friday, which is American Thursday, if you're watching from America, about a startup medicinal cannabis in Australia. And I'm going to be running the emails. I'll be doing that. Yeah, that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah, it's not like they're like, oh, this is an educational piece of content. Like I have like my list for In the Pit podcast.
It's not marketing because it's educational. Watch this.
It's a scraped list. It's every startup founder in the US that's seed to Series A. Okay, I have the list is 12,000 now. The open rate I got on the last email was 65%. All of these people are funded, and I'm in front of them on a weekly basis with content that's basically here's how to grow companies and talking to people, right? So have the call to action in that newsletter. Like I can at the bottom, I'm like, yo, whatever the spot, like brought to you by or sponsored by. So like the Biotech Startups podcast, doing the exact same thing. Like you need equipment leasing, boom, we are here every week. So the podcast is like a disguise for this branded content. It also solves that problem of what do I send to this list every week? I'm not having to go like dig through. I'm not having to do newsletter work, right? Like these daily newsletters. Like I talked to some of the owners of these, and they're like, yo, it's exhausting. Like we're constantly looking for like new things. Like that's my job is literally to try to find interesting things, and you're just on this content treadmill. And we're in contrast. So where I'm at with this is you could build these newsletters out. So say you get 500,000 people on a list, and you're just sending out podcasts to it. Like I can go sell ad space on that newsletter, especially if it's in like a tech space for God knows what. It'll cover the cost and also cover the growth of that like that media asset is how I'm thinking about it. And so all of that together is like where I see this going. There's this part of me, I'm like, once we get Swell to a super stable place, like I think I'm going to go build like a podcast network and just go after every category that's like B2B marketing, B2B content, like anything that's related to that, and then build out this whole network and have every head of growth or like the head of growth podcast, right? Or the head of marketing podcast, and every head of growth, every head of marketing in the US have those people listen to this thing on a weekly basis. And literally the whole strategy is I just get their peers to come on and talk about themselves and like what they're doing, and then all the other heads of growth have that learning. But then I suddenly have this newsletter with 20,000 people. It's not a huge list, right? But it's every head of growth that has a 5 million marketing, whatever. So anyways, that's like where my head's at with all this right now.
So just to sum up that section, the newsletter is a drip feed where you can only do a maximum of 200 of people in that specific niche to be like, click, watch this podcast, which is a disguise for marketing, but it's educational at the same time, and they're listening to it. And there's 2 things that are coming out of the listener's head. 1 is educational, and 2, how do I do the same thing as a founder if you're pitching to founders?
That's super interesting. As long as you're not crossing a line of landing in spam buckets, which you're not, then it's brilliant. And because I think what you're doing is in a way Mr. Beast's marketing funnel. So his cost of acquisition is 0, right? If he gives away $1 million, he was given $1 million from a brand, let's say it's a consumer app. He then goes and spends that money on a video. So he's net 0 on that video, but his audience grew by whatever number of millions. He then has that following to then go sell t-shirts, chocolate bars, formerly burgers, whatever he wants to sell. What you're doing is very similar. So if you were to only have newsletters and this podcast as your acquisition channel, you could theoretically cut your cost of acquisition to 0 if you have a brand that's willing to sponsor that. Now, maybe that's your brand for the time being, so it's not 0, but you could have another company come in there and sponsor it because you have an audience of, let's say, creators or founders, whatever that group is.
Totally.
Is that accurate, do you think?
100%. That's like how I'm looking at it, right? It's like, cool, this creates inbound for us, creates notoriety and trust, and I get to have a conversation like if I can be in every startup founder's ears every week, right? Having conversations on here's how we're seeing other people grow their businesses, right? Whether it's software.
That's the aim of marketing. If you can find where your customers listen or where they consume information. So if you think about podcasting, who listens to podcasts? People who want to learn. And if you're in the business space, it would be people who want to grow their business when it comes to sales, marketing, product fulfillment, all that kind of stuff. So you have to be really careful to understand who are your market, who's your target audience, and who's your ideal customer profile, and how do they consume information. If you're pitching podcasts to people who don't listen to podcasts, it won't work. This is what he's referring to. So let's finish it up.
software, whether it's services, just internet companies, and talking about the strategies and the tactics that people are using. Think about what value that provides. So we did this at Rupa Health. So this is the last company I was at, and this is where this whole kind of idea came from. Really came from five or 6 years ago. I was reading this book, and it was talking about like these media companies that you have no idea about. One of them's called Arrow Electronics, biggest electronics components reseller in the world, $6 billion like company, right? Like market cap's huge. Nobody knows they exist. Their whole strategy is like they own basically every like media brand that exists related to like electronic components. They own it. Magazines, blogs, website, emails, newsletter, anything, right? Like they own that whole sphere, and it's all just funneled down into it. And so it was that, and then learning how like Red Bull is actually just a media company that sells a product. It's not a product company that makes media. Like people get that backwards.
Yeah. By the way, if you go,
And this is how where we're going to finish up. If you're starting out, or if you're trying to pitch an offer to any company, especially when it's a B2B offer, your job is to convince them that if they want podcasting as an offer that you're pitching, your pitch is to convince them that their company is now a media first company, product second, especially if they're under 1 million recurring revenue. Because if you're below that level, you need to be marketing more. And if you're marketing more, podcasting is a great way to market trust and authority through education for 45 minutes. 45 minutes of education and free value, you're going to build some sort of trust versus a 10-second short or a 10-minute how-to video. A 10-second short builds attention and authority. So that's where you cut up the podcast to build that top of funnel attention, which funnels into the podcast for them to listen to the whole podcast. So the short is a tease into the podcast to build trust, which brings traffic into your offer as a founder. So that's how the offer works. So if you're interested in this, if you're a coach, consultant, founder, C-suite, and you believe that you need that authority in the online space, shoot me a message, hit me up on LinkedIn, because this is still a blue ocean. No one's on this yet. And if you're in this niche that no one has authority over yet, it's your chance to become that thought leader through podcasting, which only requires 1 hour of your time per week, and I'll sort out the rest. So therefore you will have every single day of content. So you're in front of people's ears and eyes when they're consuming information. Well, that's it for today. And tomorrow we're just going to keep rolling in more content and more content and more content until I can reach you founders, because you're either on LinkedIn or YouTube trying to figure out marketing because you're still under 1 million recurring revenue. I'll see you in the next video.